I should have known better, but hope has a funny way of hanging on when logic lets go. It had been a rough year. Long silences over dinner, missed calls, distracted nods in place of real conversations. Still, I told myself things could shift. That maybe, just maybe, Camille would look at me like she used to. Like I still mattered. That's why I parked outside her sister's house with a steadying breath, clutching 3 small things that, to me, felt enormous. The roses were her favorite, deep crimson with curled velvet petals, the kind she used to keep in a vase beside our bed when we first moved in together. The perfume, vintage, was nearly impossible to find. I'd called boutiques in 3 states, finally tracking it down in a dusty shop that didn't even have a website. And the letter, that damn letter, I'd written over 3 nights with trembling hands and too much heart. Pages filled with words I hadn't dared say aloud in months. I folded it gently, sealed it in red, and tucked it inside a white gift bag. I stepped out of the car and walked up the flagstone path. Everything about Camille's sister's house was curated to impress. Neatly trimmed hedges, symmetrical lanterns, and a front door painted the color of sea glass. Inside, the air was citrus bright and too cold. The kind of cold that didn't come from air conditioning, but from something deeper, something that bristled beneath polite smiles and forced greetings. I spotted Camille in the living room, her back to me, hair pinned in that effortless updo she wore to make it seem like she hadn't tried. She wore white, always white, because it made her stand out. Her laugh drifted through the room, light and deliberate, aimed at a joke I hadn't heard. I approached with the bag in hand and said her name. She turned. "Oh," she said, her smile stiffening ever so slightly. "You made it." "I did," I replied, holding out the gift. "Happy birthday." There was a pause, just long enough to make it awkward. She reached into the bag, pulled out the perfume first, and tilted her head. "Wow," she said. "This takes me back." But it wasn't the warm kind of wow. It was the kind that lands with a thud. She passed the box around like it was an artifact from another life. Then the roses. She glanced at them, then at me. "Red?" she asked. "A little on the nose, don't you think?" I forced a smile. "They're your favorite." "Were," she corrected. Her voice dipped in polite disinterest. She didn't reach for the envelope, just pushed it deeper into the bag with a quick, dismissive hand, as if it were a receipt or a flyer someone had stuck in there by mistake. My heart pinched in the space between 2 beats, but I kept smiling. Brunch had already started, plates of poached eggs and avocado toast artfully arranged on marble counters. Champagne flutes sparkled in the sunlight. Everyone was dressed like a magazine spread. Linen, pastels, effortless wealth. Her sister gave me a nod that wasn't quite a welcome. Her friend Margot waved, then leaned into Camille and whispered something that made them both laugh. I stood there holding a mimosa someone left unattended, pretending it was mine. No one offered me one. Camille slipped back into her circle like I hadn't just handed her a piece of my heart. She didn't introduce me, didn't even mention the gift. I tried to jump into the conversation, something about a funny moment at work, a client mistaking me for someone famous. Harmless, quick, light. But before I finished the sentence, her cousin Troy jumped in with a story about his crypto wins, and suddenly I was invisible again. Camille didn't stop him, didn't redirect, didn't say a word, just sipped her drink and smiled. It hit me in slow, aching waves. The way her eyes slid past me, the way no one asked me questions or made space for me in the circle, the way everything I brought, the gifts, the letter, myself, had been treated like background noise to the performance they were all staging. But I stayed. I stood through the brunch, through the conversations I wasn't part of, through the soft music and sharper laughter. I stayed because some foolish, flickering hope inside me believed it might still shift, that she might open the envelope, that something might soften. It didn't. By the end of the meal, I was still holding that mimosa, still watching her smile at everyone but me. And when she leaned in close to Margot, giggling, her hand on her arm, I saw the truth clear and sharp. I was no longer part of her story, just a footnote she hadn't edited out yet. And still, I smiled, because I hadn't yet seen what was waiting behind the garage. I thought maybe it was in my head, that I was reading too much into things, that the cold reception was just brunch jitters, or maybe her friends weren't sure how to talk to me anymore. But then came the laughter, not just once, over and over, like waves at high tide, each one pulling me further from shore. I stood near the edge of the living room, watching Camille hold court in a circle of sun-drenched women. Margot, with her oversized sunglasses pushed into her blonde hair like she was constantly on vacation. Lena, who wore designer everything and couldn't hold eye contact if her life depended on it. And Camille, my wife, or at least the version of her that existed when she was with them. Effortless, dazzling, untouchable. They laughed too loud, too hard. Not with me. Never with me. But it's something one of them had said about men who still think roses mean anything. I didn't have to guess what they were talking about. Margot caught my eye as she lifted her glass. You still get handwritten letters? Wow, retro, she said to Camille. Camille didn't defend me. She didn't even smile awkwardly or try to change the subject. She just tilted her head and shrugged like she didn't see the value in it either. My heart clenched a little, but I told myself to breathe, to let it go. I was here for her, for us. I held on to that mimosa like it was the only thing keeping me anchored. No one had offered me a drink. I just found it abandoned on the counter and claimed it. Camille hadn't noticed. She was too busy laughing at a story her cousin Troy was telling, something about his crypto investments and how he almost lost $5,000 in a coin named after a dog. I tried to share a work update, something I thought she might be proud of. We'd landed a new client, big one, national reach, the kind of deal I used to call her about on the drive home, back when we were still celebrating each other's wins. I took a breath, stepped into the circle, and said, "So my team just closed a contract with." Troy cut in before I could finish. "Wait, did you hear what Elon said about Dogecoin this morning?" Camille turned to him instantly, eyes bright, interested. Not even a glance in my direction. I stood there, half smiling, the kind of smile you wear when you're pretending to be in on the joke, but you're not even in the room. Every second stretched. My words shriveled midair, unwanted. The brunch table was long and white, decorated with blush napkins and gold-trimmed plates. Everything perfectly Instagrammable. I sat at the far end, beside the window, where the sun could hide the sting in my eyes. The seat beside me remained empty. When the toast began, Camille's sister stood up with her flute. "To Camille," she said. "The woman who does it all, beauty, brains, and business." The room erupted in claps and cheers. Camille stood and gave a modest bow. Someone yelled, "Speech," and she obliged, standing up with that magnetic poise of hers. "Thanks, everyone," she said. "I feel really lucky to be surrounded by such powerful, inspiring women. You've lifted me in ways I'll never forget." I raised my glass. She didn't look my way. Not once. Not even a blink. She talked about her boutique, about the milestones she hit this year, about self-love and resilience, about cutting out what doesn't serve you. The crowd snapped their fingers at that one. A whole damn chorus of approval. And for a moment, I wondered if I was one of the things she was talking about cutting out. Maybe I already had been. After the speech, people milled around again, refilling glasses, complimenting Camille on her dress, taking photos against the pastel balloon wall. I offered to help clean up, just to feel useful. No one protested. They didn't really acknowledge it either. I gathered the plates, stacked neatly, one hand steadying the cutlery, the other balancing the weight. It was something to do. Something quiet. Something that gave me an excuse to leave the room for a minute and breathe in a silence that didn't sting so sharply. As I passed by Camille and her circle, Margot glanced at me and whispered to her. Camille smirked, but didn't look my way. It was a performance, and I didn't even have a role in it anymore. Outside, the air was cooler. The distant sound of wind chimes danced from the neighbor's porch. I walked around the back to drop the plates near the kitchen side entrance. I told myself it was fine, that she was just caught up in the moment, that the letter would mean something later, that maybe she'd read it tonight, and something would shift. I told myself a lot of things, but deep down, I knew. She wasn't laughing with me. She hadn't been for a long time. The plates in my hand rattled softly as I walked across the side path, rounded the corner of the house, and stepped into the shaded area behind the garage. I told myself this was just a favor, clearing a few dishes, making myself useful. But maybe I needed the distance. Maybe I just couldn't stand another minute of clinking glasses and inside jokes that excluded me. I balanced the plates on a patio bench for a second and adjusted the trash bag beside the recycling bin. Something was off. The bin was cracked slightly open, just enough to see what was inside. Something red. Crushed. My breath caught. I set the plates down and crouched. The late afternoon sun poured in at an angle that lit up the corner just enough. The roses. Deep crimson, their petals now bruised and limp, crushed under something heavy, like they were tossed carelessly, stepped uneven. My fingers twitched. Beside the flowers lay the perfume box, still sealed. The creamy ribbon I tied around it was smeared with something, maybe food, maybe dirt. It hadn't even been opened. Just discarded. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. And then I saw the envelope. The red one. Tucked halfway beneath the trash bag, still intact, still sealed. Still unread. I reached for it slowly, like it might burn me. Like it might scream. I held it in my hand for a long moment, my thumb tracing the slight curve of the paper, the weight of the ink inside. 3 nights I sat at our kitchen table writing that letter. 3 nights of starting over. Of staring at a blank page, wondering how to explain everything I still felt. Everything I still wanted to believe we could be. 3 nights of trying to bridge the silence that had grown between us. I'd imagined her reading it quietly later that night, maybe in bed, maybe with a glass of wine. I imagined her eyes softening, her fingers tracing the margin where I'd written her name. I imagined it maturing. But now it sat here, abandoned, as if even the effort to open it had been too much. I crouched there, frozen. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe a mistake. Maybe someone else had done this. Maybe Camille had set it down and someone, not knowing, had tossed it. But in my gut, I knew. There was no mistake. This wasn't carelessness. It was a choice. The sound of laughter drifted out from the house, high-pitched, familiar. Camille's voice wove through it like a ribbon, polished and unconcerned. I stared at the trash bag like it held something sacred that had been defiled. Because it did. I picked up the item slowly. Roses, box, letter, and placed them in the bag I'd originally brought them in. The handles trembled in my grip. I stood, heart pounding, breath shallow, staring at the back door. I could go back in. I could ask her why. I could hold the gifts up and demand an answer. But what would that get me? More laughter? A roll of her eyes? A cold shoulder masked in politeness? No. I'd been humiliated enough for one afternoon. I turned and walked back toward the front, the brunch noises growing softer behind me. The warmth of the sun on my back felt like a cruel joke, mocking the cold I carried in my chest. As I reached the car, I paused, looked down at the bag in my hand. Everything I had brought, my attempt at connection, at remembering who we were, had been left to rot behind a garage. I placed the bag gently on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it for a moment before I turned the key. I didn't slam the door. I didn't peel out of the driveway or blast the radio like some wounded teenager trying to prove something. I just left. No goodbyes. No scene. No storming back in to confront her. The quiet hurt more than yelling ever could. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every turn was a question I didn't want to answer. Every red light, a chance to think about what I'd just seen. I glanced at the bag once, then again. The roses had started to bleed slightly onto the tissue paper, red smears like echoes of something tender that had been crushed. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat there for a while. Just breathing. Just existing. Trying to remind myself of who I was outside of her. Outside of the cold space we called a marriage. Inside, I placed the bag gently on the counter. I removed the roses, laying them flat like they deserved dignity. The perfume box I set beside them, unopened. And then the letter. I unfolded it slowly. The creases were soft, worn from my hands. I read the first few lines out loud. I remember the first time you let me hold your hand in public. It was raining. You said you hated the rain, but you didn't pull away. My voice caught. I folded the letter again, pressed it flat, and slid it back into the envelope. They weren't hers anymore. They were mine. And suddenly, I didn't want to give anything else to someone who couldn't even hold on. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the fan above me marking the hours I didn't count. I'd taken off my shoes but never bothered with the rest. Just sprawled across the sheets, the same way my thoughts sprawled across the dark, messy, tangled, hard to face. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry. I wasn't heartbroken in the cinematic way I expected. No tears. No shouting. Just this hollow weight in my chest, as if someone had scooped out something vital and left me behind to function on fumes. By morning, the sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin lines, striping the wall across from me. I still hadn't moved much. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And somehow that silence felt louder than anything Camille or her friends had said yesterday. I walked barefoot to the kitchen and looked at the bag I'd lined up on the counter, roses, unopened perfume, sealed letter. It sat there like a shrine to a version of me that still believed in us. I stood staring at it for a long time, waiting for something to rise, maybe rage, maybe clarity. But what came was different. What came was final. I didn't want to give anything else. I didn't want to beg to be seen. So I picked up the letter, laid it flat on the counter. The ink had smudged slightly where I'd held it too tightly, my palm, maybe damp from sweat or grief. But the words were still legible, still mine. And then I did something strange. I read it to myself again. The first line made my throat tighten. I know we haven't spoken heart to heart in a long time, but I wanted to try. I wanted to remember us. I wanted you to remember me. That man, the one who wrote those words, he deserved better than being thrown out like spoiled leftovers. I didn't need closure. I needed clarity, and I had it now. I walked over to the trash bin and opened the lid, hovering for a moment with the envelope in hand. But I stopped myself. No, not this time. This letter wouldn't be discarded. It wouldn't be lost behind a garage. Instead, I placed it back inside the bag, beside the roses and the perfume. They weren't gifts anymore. They were artifacts. Proof of my effort, of what I was willing to give before I realized she didn't want it. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet. Maybe burn the letter. Maybe donate the perfume. Maybe press one of the crushed roses in a book just to remind myself that I did try. But not today. I left them on the counter and grabbed my keys. I needed to get out. Just drive. Breathe something that wasn't stale air and stale feelings. The city was already alive when I pulled onto the freeway. Cars darted in and out of lanes, commuters clutched coffees, and for a few brief moments, it felt like I could blend into the normalcy. I drove aimlessly. Past the coffee shop Camille used to love. Past the bookstore where we picked out travel guides we never used. Past the park bench where she first told me she thought she was falling for me. That was years ago now. It felt like someone else's life. Eventually, I ended up near the waterfront. The pier was mostly empty, the air crisp with sea salt and memory. I parked and walked along the wooden planks until I found a spot at the edge, sitting on the bench with nothing but water ahead of me. That was when it hit me, not a breakdown, not a surge, but something gentler, quieter, relief. Not because I'd lost her, but because I finally stopped chasing something that had stopped existing long ago. I pulled out my phone and stared at her contact. Camille, home. I hadn't changed it in years. I hovered my thumb over the screen. I could send her something sharp, something petty. I could confront her, demand an answer. But I didn't. Instead, I just stared at the contact photo for a second, then hit edit. I removed the word home, left it blank. Saved. That was goodbye. Not the loud kind. Not the kind with slammed doors and shouted regrets. Just the kind where you stop pretending. I returned home late afternoon. The sunlight had shifted again, softer, warmer. I walked into the kitchen, looked at the items still sitting untouched. I didn't feel the ache anymore. Just stillness. Like a wound had finally scabbed over. I lined everything up again. This time not for Camille, not even for the memory of us. For me. The letter stayed sealed, but not forgotten. Because the goodbye I never said was louder than anything words could carry. And somehow, in that silence, I found myself again. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the same mug of tea I hadn't finished the day before. It had gone cold hours ago, but I kept sipping it like it would fill the space that had formed inside me. The roses, the perfume, the letter, they still sat on the counter like they were waiting for some final verdict. But I wasn't ready to throw them out. Not yet. Not because I wanted to hold on to her. I didn't. Not anymore. But because I wanted her to feel what I felt, even if just for a second. That's when the idea came. A flicker at first, then a spark. I opened my laptop, pulled up my email, and wrote the subject line slowly. The letter. Inside, I typed exactly what needed to be said. Nothing more, nothing less. Just so you know, there was a small envelope of cash inside the birthday letter. It was meant for that Paris trip you've been dreaming about. Hope it didn't get lost in the trash. No salutation. No sign-off. Just the message. I sat there for a moment, hovering over the send button. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There was no grand scheme here, no dramatic twist. Just a seed planted. Let her water it. I clicked send. Then I turned off the laptop, washed my hands, and went to bed. I didn't dream. Didn't toss or turn. For the first time in weeks, my sleep was solid, uninterrupted. No whispered doubts, no echo of her voice curling through my memory like smoke. I woke up at 7:54 a.m. and checked my phone without really thinking. First notification. Camille, 8:06 a.m. Wait, what cash? Then another. 8:09 a.m. Are you serious? Then a third. 8:11 a.m. How much was in there? She called at 8:14. I let it ring. Voicemail. She called again at 8:17. Another voicemail. I didn't listen to either. Just let them sit there. Unopened. Just like she left my letter. It was almost funny how fast she moved when money was involved. How quickly her curiosity turned to panic. I imagined her retracing her steps, trying to remember whether she opened the envelope, whether she even saw it. I imagined her crouched behind her sister's garage, lifting the cracked recycling bin, sifting through birthday trash and leftovers, her breath short, fingers sticky with regret. And still, no apology. Not for the gifts. Not for the public humiliation. Not for discarding me like I'd never mattered. Just, what cash? I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, letting the electric hum buzz while the phone buzzed again on the sink. She texted at 8:24. Was it a joke? Please tell me you're kidding. I let her sit in it. Let her mind circle the drain of what could have been. Let her wonder if she had just thrown away a trip, a gift, a gesture that might have meant something, if she'd only looked a little closer, if she'd only cared enough to open the damn envelope. I didn't respond. I went about my day like it was any other morning. Showered. Got dressed. Made a proper cup of tea this time. Hot, steep, strong, the way I used to like it before I forgot to enjoy things. The texts didn't stop. 9:15. Cam, this isn't funny. 9:38. I need to know. Just tell me how much. 10:02. Are you mad at me? Because I didn't mean to throw it away if there was actually something in there. 10:07. I just need to know how much it was. Please. Still no apology. Still no. I'm sorry for not reading it. No. I'm sorry for laughing. No. I'm sorry for making you feel invisible. Just the sin of desperation growing stronger with each message. By noon, she was calling again. I turned my phone on silent and tossed it on the couch. I didn't need to hear her voice today. Not when I finally had peace. Not when I'd managed to reclaim just a piece of the dignity I'd slowly handed away over the years. I stepped outside, let the breeze touch my face. The sky was clear, the air clean in a way it hadn't been yesterday. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was truth, simple and silent. She didn't care about the letter until she thought it was worth something. And now, she'd never know whether it was. That was the lie that made her listen. And the truth that let me finally walk away. The lie had done its work. Camille's silence by mid-afternoon told me everything I needed to know. She was still stewing, still unsure whether she'd thrown away a birthday card or a Paris getaway. But she wasn't what I was focused on anymore. That day, I turned my attention to something far more intentional. See, Camille hadn't built her boutique alone. When she was still shipping orders from our living room, when her online store had more broken links than products, I was the one who taught her how to set up payment systems. I drove her to pop-up markets, designed her logo, introduced her to my network, friends and colleagues who had built small empires in fashion and design. The same people she now claimed were hers. So that afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I reclaimed space. I texted 3 people, Paula, Lyle, and Renee. Each of them had started as my connection. Each of them had become a resource Camille leaned on when her business was still in the stage of hope and duct tape. Hey, just wanted to let you know I'd appreciate it if my name wasn't tied to Camille's brand anymore. No drama, just personal clarity. Thanks. I didn't elaborate. I didn't guilt them or try to explain what she'd done. I didn't need to. They were smart, empathetic, and more than anything, they remembered who had made those introductions in the first place. The responses came quickly. Paula, of course. You've always been generous with your network. I respect your boundary. Lyle, I figured something was off. Consider it done. Renee, I understand. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Just like that, the tide began to shift, not from vengeance, but from clarity. I wasn't tearing her down. I was simply stepping away. I was taking back the scaffolding I had built under her tower. And by Thursday, the cracks began to show. Camille didn't call me. She wouldn't dare, not with the last message hanging unanswered in the air, still pulsing like a bruise. But 2 of her clients paused their collaborations. One vendor pulled out of a custom order. Quiet ripples in her carefully curated world. Not because I asked for it. Not because I campaigned. But because when I stepped away, they saw the full picture more clearly. She called me a saboteur in a message to a mutual acquaintance. Sabotaging? That word sat with me. I wasn't sabotaging her life. I was just choosing not to support someone who threw my heart in the trash and laughed while her friends ridiculed it. That wasn't sabotage. That was survival. And still, I said nothing. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post shady quotes or call friends to plead my case. I stayed quiet, calm, and deliberate. For once, I wasn't the one trying to fix something. I was the one walking away. Later that evening, I got an email from a local brand rep I'd once referred to Camille. She thanked me for the connection but added that she'd be stepping back from the boutique's planned campaign. Too much internal noise, she said. I stared at that line for a moment. Internal noise. Fitting. That had been our marriage in the end, smiles on the outside, noise underneath. Unheard apologies. Unseen efforts. Unopened letters. I closed the email, exhaled, and realized I hadn't thought about Camille's perfume all day. Or the roses. Or the letter still sealed and waiting. And that was progress. I walked to the kitchen, looked at the items still sitting where I left them. The roses had wilted further, curling in on themselves. The perfume box had collected a fine layer of dust along its edge. The letter remained closed. I didn't feel the need to move them. Not yet. They were no longer tokens of hope. They were markers of transformation. Later that night, my phone buzzed again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. No message. Just static. But I didn't need to hear it. I knew what it was. Camille wasn't used to losing ground. She'd always been the center of every room, the star in every scene. But now, the narrative was changing. And for once, she wasn't directing it. I wasn't a villain in her story. I was just no longer part of the script. And that truth, that absence, it spoke louder than anything I could have said. I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of water, and walked out onto the porch. The sky was deep blue, the kind that settles just before stars start blinking through. I looked up, breathed in the silence, and let the night remind me of what I was finally learning. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't burning it all down. It's walking away from what you helped build, because you finally realize you were the only one holding it up. Friday morning came with the kind of eerie stillness that usually follows a storm, except this one hadn't been loud. No lightning, no thunder, just quiet decisions and unseen dominoes, and now I was watching them fall. Her boutique's social page, normally a flood of soft-lit product shots and curated reels, had gone silent. No new posts. No behind-the-scenes stories. Nothing but yesterday's image, a flat lay of skincare bottles and a caption about rising above the noise. It had only a handful of likes compared to her usual buzz. That silence told me more than any text ever could. I didn't reach out. I didn't ask how she was doing. I didn't check to see if the post had been taken down or if her team had gone on break. I didn't need to. Camille thrived on appearance, on momentum. For her to go quiet online was as loud as she'd ever been. That afternoon, a text came in from her sister. Elise, is this about the birthday thing? She's freaking out. I didn't respond. I read it once, then let it sit. Let her wonder. Let Camille do what she always did, spin stories, paint herself the wounded one, perform panic. Because I knew how this would go. First the confusion, then the scramble, then the attempt to reframe everything. I knew the script. And right on cue, Margot posted a story. A muted selfie, oversized sunglasses, latte in hand. Over it, a quote in delicate script. Strong women make weak men nervous. The caption underneath, some people can't handle it. No names. No tags. But come on. It was a spotlight with my silhouette in the center. I almost laughed. Not because it was clever, it wasn't. But because it was so transparent. The performance, the deflection, the need to twist a simple, quiet boundary into a full-blown narrative of oppression. I didn't respond. Didn't share it. Didn't care. Troy tried to call that evening. I saw his name flash across my screen while I was cooking dinner. Just a quiet stir-fry, something simple to keep my hands moving while my mind settled. I let it ring out. Seconds later, a voicemail. I played it out of curiosity. Hey man, not trying to get in the middle of anything, but I think Camille's really hurt. She didn't mean for all that to happen at brunch. Maybe just talk to her. I think she feels blindsided. Blindsided. That word echoed like a joke. She had tossed my effort in the trash, let her friends laugh at me, hadn't even opened the letter. And she felt blindsided? I deleted the message. Not out of anger. Just peace. I had no interest in defending my exit. The next day, Camille's boutique account posted something vague and strained. We're taking a moment to regroup and realign. Thank you for your patience. The comment section, usually full of praise, had shifted. A few supportive notes still trickled in, but there were more questions now. Everything okay? What's going on with the launch? Hope you're all right. Even Renee messaged me later that evening. She's unraveling. You okay? I was more than okay. For the first time in a long while, I was centered. That weekend, I took a long walk through the neighborhood, a path Camille and I used to tread when we were still planning for someday. We'd point at houses and talk about raising kids, about maybe expanding her boutique into a physical space. She'd squeeze my hand and smile like she could see it already. But those dreams had dried into something brittle. What used to be a shared vision had turned into an audience for her, and a seat in the corner for me. Now, as I passed those same houses, I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt distance. And distance can be healing. I didn't have her voice in my head anymore. Not the sharp critiques, not the disinterested silence, not even the flirty tone she used in public, but rarely at home. All I had was quiet. The kind I used to be afraid of. The kind I now welcomed. I checked her boutique site that night, not to gloat, just out of curiosity. Several items had been marked temporarily unavailable. A few testimonials had been removed. One of the partner links led to a 404 error. It wasn't crashing, but it was faltering. And none of it came with what I'd waited years to hear, a real apology. Not a performative message, not a spin, just a simple acknowledgement that I had loved her, tried for her, fought for her, and she hadn't seen it until it was gone. But that was the thing about apologies. They had to come from the person who hurt you. And Camille had always been allergic to accountability. So I didn't wait for it anymore. She could post 100 vague quotes. She could vent to her friends. Spin the tale however she needed to keep herself intact. I had my own truth. And for the first time, it didn't need anyone's permission to be real. She didn't call ahead, didn't send a message, didn't even text to ask if I was at the office. Camille just appeared, stormed, really, through the glass double doors like she had every right to still walk through them. I was sitting behind my desk, halfway through reviewing a project brief when the receptionist buzzed me. Mr. Ward? There's a Camille here to see you. My fingers froze above the keyboard. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The doors opened anyway, and there she was. Cream blazer, matching heels, a tight bun so sharp it looked like a weapon. Fire in her eyes. She didn't look uncertain. She looked furious. "Can we talk?" she said, already walking into my office like it still belonged to her too. I leaned back slowly. Calm. Controlled. "You're here." She dropped her purse on the chair across from me and crossed her arms. "You're humiliating me." I didn't flinch. "Not this time." "No," I said plainly. "You did that when you laughed while your friends mocked a gift I wrote with my heart." She scoffed. "You're blowing that out of proportion. It was one moment. One brunch. You're punishing me for, what? For not liking a letter." I stared at her, searching for any flicker of recognition in her face. Any crack in the wall. One moment. I repeated. "Camille, that letter was 3 nights of pouring myself onto paper, trying to reach you. The perfume took weeks to track down. The roses, your favorite color, the kind I used to bring you when you were still building your shop out of our living room. And you didn't just ignore them. You threw them away." Her jaw tightened. "It wasn't intentional. I didn't mean for them to end up in the trash." "Does it matter?" I asked. "Because it wasn't just about the trash. It was about how easy it was for you to let people laugh at me. How quickly you looked through me like I was invisible. That wasn't one moment. That was every moment." Her voice softened, but not in apology. "In strategy. You could have just said something. You could have pulled me aside and talked to me." I gave a dry chuckle. "And when, exactly? Between Margot's one-liners or Troy's crypto sermon? You didn't even introduce me, Camille. I was your husband standing in your sister's living room like a stranger." She sat down finally, breathing hard through her nose, trying to regain control. "We built this life together," she said. "You don't get to just tear it down because you felt slighted." I nodded slowly. "You're right. We did build it. But you threw it out behind the garage." Silence. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw her without the smoke and mirrors. Not the carefully crafted brand. Not the influencer. Not the boutique owner or the brunch socialite. Just Camille. Cornered. Vulnerable. And still not willing to say the one thing that mattered. I leaned forward. "You're not here because you miss me. You're here because your business is bleeding and people are starting to see through the gloss. And you don't know how to handle a world where I'm not holding the scaffolding anymore." "That's not fair," she said sharply. "But it's true," I replied. She blinked hard, the way she always did when she wanted to cry but refused to let the tears fall. I didn't offer her a tissue. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I didn't ask your friends to stop posting quotes about empowered women. I didn't leak anything. I didn't retaliate. I just stopped holding the door open. And the lie? She asked suddenly. The cash? Was there really money in that letter? I tilted my head slightly, meeting her gaze with nothing but calm. I guess you'll never know. Her mouth parted in disbelief. You tricked me. No, I said. I gave you what you gave me, uncertainty. Doubt. A sealed envelope you didn't care enough to open. She stood again, adjusting her blazer, eyes darting around like she was looking for the exit, but also something she might have dropped, dignity. Maybe. Goodbye, Camille, I said, not cruelly. Just firmly. Like closing a book. She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. You'll regret this, she said quietly. I didn't even blink. I already regretted staying this long. And with that, she walked out. No slamming doors. No parting words. Just the echo of heels across tile and a stillness that stayed long after she was gone. I looked out my office window, watched the city move beneath me, fast and uninterested. Somewhere down there, Camille was recalculating, spinning another version of the story. I didn't care. She had come expecting to find the old me, eager, apologetic, willing to bend. But he was gone. And in his place stood a man who finally realized that silence is sometimes the loudest answer of all. She didn't call ahead. Didn't send a message. Didn't even text to ask if I was at the office. Camille just appeared, stormed, really, through the glass double doors like she had every right to still walk through them. I was sitting behind my desk, halfway through reviewing a project brief when the receptionist buzzed me. Mr. Ward? There's a Camille here to see you. My fingers froze above the keyboard. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The doors opened anyway, and there she was. Cream blazer, matching heels, a tight bun so sharp it looked like a weapon. Fire in her eyes. She didn't look uncertain. She looked furious. Can we talk? She said, already walking into my office like it still belonged to her too. I leaned back slowly. Calm. Controlled. You're here. She dropped her purse on the chair across from me and crossed her arms. You're humiliating me. I didn't flinch. Not this time. No, I said plainly. You did that when you laughed while your friends mocked a gift I wrote with my heart. She scoffed. You're blowing that out of proportion. It was one moment. One brunch. You're punishing me for, what? For not liking a letter. I stared at her, searching for any flicker of recognition in her face. Any crack in the wall. One moment. I repeated. Camille, that letter was 3 nights of pouring myself onto paper, trying to reach you. The perfume took weeks to track down. The roses, your favorite color, the kind I used to bring you when you were still building your shop out of our living room. And you didn't just ignore them. You threw them away. Her jaw tightened. It wasn't intentional. I didn't mean for them to end up in the trash. Does it matter? I asked. Because it wasn't just about the trash. It was about how easy it was for you to let people laugh at me. How quickly you looked through me like I was invisible. That wasn't one moment. That was every moment. Her voice softened, but not in apology. In strategy. You could have just said something. You could have pulled me aside and talked to me. I gave a dry chuckle. And when, exactly? Between Margot's one-liners or Troy's crypto sermon? You didn't even introduce me, Camille. I was your husband standing in your sister's living room like a stranger. She sat down finally, breathing hard through her nose, trying to regain control. We built this life together, she said. You don't get to just tear it down because you felt slighted. I nodded slowly. You're right. We did build it. But you threw it out behind the garage. Silence. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw her without the smoke and mirrors. Not the carefully crafted brand. Not the influencer. Not the boutique owner or the brunch socialite. Just Camille. Cornered. Vulnerable. And still not willing to say the one thing that mattered. I leaned forward. You're not here because you miss me. You're here because your business is bleeding and people are starting to see through the gloss. And you don't know how to handle a world where I'm not holding the scaffolding anymore. That's not fair, she said sharply. But it's true, I replied. She blinked hard, the way she always did when she wanted to cry but refused to let the tears fall. I didn't offer her a tissue. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. I didn't ask your friends to stop posting quotes about empowered women. I didn't leak anything. I didn't retaliate. I just stopped holding the door open. And the lie? She asked suddenly. The cash? Was there really money in that letter? I tilted my head slightly, meeting her gaze with nothing but calm. I guess you'll never know. Her mouth parted in disbelief. You tricked me. No, I said. I gave you what you gave me, uncertainty, doubt, a sealed envelope you didn't care enough to open. She stood again, adjusting her blazer, eyes darting around like she was looking for the exit, but also something she might have dropped. Dignity, maybe. Goodbye, Camille, I said, not cruelly, just firmly, like closing a book. She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. You'll regret this, she said quietly. I didn't even blink. I already regretted staying this long. And with that, she walked out. No slamming doors. No parting words. Just the echo of heels across tile and a stillness that stayed long after she was gone. I looked out my office window, watched the city move beneath me, fast and uninterested. Somewhere down there, Camille was recalculating, spinning another version of the story. I didn't care. She had come expecting to find the old me, eager, apologetic, willing to bend. But he was gone. And in his place stood a man who finally realized that silence is sometimes the loudest answer of all. By the time Monday arrived, the quiet had transformed into something weightier. Not oppressive, but deliberate. It was the kind of quiet that made you aware of what's no longer buzzing in your life. No more Camille texts asking if I could quickly proof this caption. No more late-night calls from her about a forgotten vendor invoice or a misplaced receipt she expected me to find. No more passive requests dressed in flattery. You're just so good with people. Can you reach out to them for me? The silence wasn't empty. It was clean. But Camille didn't take silence well. And she certainly didn't take collapse without noise. By midweek, her boutique lease wasn't renewed. The whispers started fast, first in the design circles, then among the vendors, and finally with the clients she once flaunted on her stories. No official statement, of course. Just transitioning operations, exploring new opportunities, taking time to realign the vision. The usual PR gloss on a growing crack. Her sister Elise texted again. This is getting bad. You sure this isn't personal? I didn't answer. Because it wasn't personal, not in the way Camille wanted to frame it. This wasn't revenge. It was a boundary. And boundaries feel like betrayal to people who are used to you bending for them. Camille started blaming me. I knew, not because she told me, but because I was still tied to people she underestimated. People she thought would keep her secrets. In a group chat with some of our former mutuals, she said I was vindictive, that I'd weaponized my connections, that I couldn't handle her success. Success. That word landed like a blade made of plastic, sharp enough to hurt, but flimsy once inspected. What success was she defending? The boutique I helped stabilize during its first 2 failing quarters? The vendor contracts I reviewed? The marketing strategy one wrote when her original pitch deck was laughed out of the room? But I didn't argue. Even when her cousin Troy posted that tone-deaf caption under one of his gym selfies. Some men are so threatened by a strong woman they try to dismantle her from the shadows. No context. No name. But we both knew who it was aimed at. Still, I didn't reply. Didn't post back. Didn't call anyone to defend me. Let them say what they needed to feel righteous. I didn't need to convince them of anything. I wasn't trying to win anymore. Because the truth was, I didn't lose. I just stopped trying to be part of a circle that had always kept me on the outside, smiling in group photos, nodding in polite approval, clinking glasses around jokes I was never in on. Now, I was free of it. And yes, it hurt. There's no getting around that. Watching someone you once loved unravel publicly, knowing they'll never tell the truth about what broke them, knowing they'll frame you as the villain because admitting their own cracks would require self-reflection. That pain was sharp, but it didn't destroy me. I didn't want her to fail. I just didn't want to keep holding the rope while she climbed over me. That week, I found myself walking into my favorite coffee shop, one I hadn't visited in months. The barista, Liana, smiled when she saw me. Hey stranger, she said, already reaching for the almond milk I used to ask for without thinking. Hey, I said, sliding into the rhythm like I never left. Still working crazy hours? She asked, tapping in my order. I paused. Not anymore. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. Just nodded and handed me the warm cup. I took it outside, sat at one of the iron-wrought tables facing the street. The sun was soft, not aggressive. People passed without looking at me, and for once, I liked that. There was a time when I craved being seen, especially by Camille. Now, I was learning the peace of being unseen, unbothered, uninterrupted. Later that night, I got a message from Renee. I heard what she's been saying. For what it's worth, I know the truth. A lot of us do. I read it twice. Not because I needed the validation, but because it was nice to know that silence doesn't mean surrender. That walking away doesn't mean weakness. That truth, when it sits still and steady, eventually reveals itself. I thanked her. kept it short. I had no desire to rally anyone to my side. This wasn't a war. There were no sides anymore. Just distance. Just healing. And Camille? She could keep spinning her narrative. She could post more quotes. She could cry to her curated circle and rewrite the past until even she believed it. But I had no interest in participating in the play. I had walked off the stage. And in doing so, I finally became the one writing the script. Weeks passed. The noise faded like it always does, replaced by the rhythm of quiet mornings and the hum of a new routine. I moved into a new apartment on the other side of town. Nothing extravagant, just clean lines, open windows, a balcony that looked out over the city lights. It was the kind of place you could breathe in. No sin of old arguments baked into the walls. No reminders of letters left unread or gifts thrown in the trash. For the first time in years, I started cooking again. Real meals. Not just takeout eaten over the sink or cold leftovers picked at during a fight. I'd spend the evening chopping vegetables with music playing low in the background, usually jazz or some instrumental playlist that didn't remind me of anyone. I laughed again, sometimes quietly to myself, sometimes loud enough to surprise me. I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd felt like that. Light. Unburdened. Like I wasn't constantly tiptoeing around someone else's moods or expectations. One night, I stepped out onto the balcony with a mug of tea in my hand. The city was alive below me, cars passing, windows glowing. There was something comforting in the anonymity of it all. No one knew my name. No one expected anything from me. And yet, I belonged to myself more now than I ever had in a room full of people who smiled while slicing me apart with every sideways glance. That's when my phone buzzed. I didn't rush to check it. I let it buzz again, twice, before I reached for it. Camille, I saw your new place. Looks nice. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No apology. Not even a nod to what had happened. No acknowledgement of the party, the laughter, the sealed envelope discarded with eggshells and used napkins. Just a message, open-ended, casually familiar, like we were still in orbit. But we weren't. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She was testing the door. She wanted to know if it was still unlocked. She wanted to see if there was any part of me left that would respond, that would crave her attention enough to crawl back toward it. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could have said something. Anything. I could have said, you don't get to do this. I could have said, you should have read the letter. I could have said, it's too late. But I didn't say any of it, because none of it mattered now. Instead, I set the phone face down on the table and walked back inside. I poured another cup of tea, this time with honey. Sat on the couch, legs tucked beneath me, and just breathed. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely anymore. It was sacred. It was earned. The next morning, I woke up with sunlight cutting clean lines across my bedroom floor. I opened the window and let the breeze in. There was no voicemail from Camille. No follow-up text. Maybe she got the message. Maybe she didn't. It didn't matter. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't performing. I wasn't apologizing for needing the kind of love that doesn't come with laughter at my expense. That evening, I found myself back on the balcony. The lights blinked across the skyline like a code only I could read. And maybe they were. Maybe they were saying, you made it. You let go. Not everyone gets to that part. Some people live their whole lives trapped in a cycle of trying to be enough for someone who's already decided they'll never be. But not me. Not anymore. I wasn't the man who wrote the letter, begging to be seen. I wasn't the man clutching a mimosa while strangers laughed. I wasn't the man gathering crushed roses from behind a garage, hoping for a different ending. I was here now. Whole. Quiet. Free. And in that stillness, with the mug warming my hands and the city stretching beneath my feet, I realized something simple and true. I didn't feel like a joke anymore. I didn't feel like the man who got left behind. I felt like the man who finally walked away.